Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for this Sabbath day. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege that we can meet in a time of peace and safety. Pray, Lord, that you will enlighten our minds, our thoughts. Be with me, Father, that, Lord, just your presence and your truths will come out. That, Father, you'll inspire me. That, Lord, you'll bless me. And bless us all here is our prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. The subject today, this morning, on this series, we'll be dealing with the 7 trumpets. And for this part, we'll be looking at trumpets number 1 to 4. In the 17, 18 years that I've been an Adventist, I've heard very, very little material on the trumpets. I don't know what your experience has been. And as I travel and read and see what's going on in Adventism, we see that there are all kinds of winds of doctrine in relation to the trumpets. And as I've studied the trumpets, I find that our historical position of the trumpets stands. It is the true position, the pioneer position. And we can prove that through great controversy when we look at the 5th and 6th trumpet, that has been placed in the past. There are some in our church that want to reapply these trumpets to the future, and there are some that even place the entire 7 trumpets in the future. And so I thought I'd put this together so that we can, as God's people, be students of the Word, that we can prepare and not be swayed by these winds of doctrine. So, the 7 trumpets, part 1. History to repeat. Many people use this quotation to reapply that these trumpets are going to repeat. The book of Revelation, in connection with the book of Daniel, especially demands study. Education, page 191. And study Revelation in connection with the book of Daniel, for history will be repeated. And as we understand what aspects of Daniel are to be repeated, then it makes sense which parts in Revelation will be repeated and which parts will not. Papal and pagan Rome. The establishment, the growth, and the reign of the papacy as a world power is distinctly a subject of prophecy, as really as is the fall of Rome and the planting of the 10 kingdoms upon the ruins thereof. Indeed, the prophecy of this is an inseparable part of the prophecy of the other. This was A.T. Jones. What A.T. Jones is saying here is that you cannot separate the fall of pagan Rome with the setup of papal Rome. They are together. And it's important that we understand exactly what took place with the fall of pagan Rome and the establishment of papal Rome. The first decisive step in the downfall of Rome was the removal of the seat of empire from the west to the east. Until then, its unity had been very faithfully preserved. After that, division and subdivision became the order of the day until the final ruin of the empire. In the series we did on Daniel 11, there was a time prophecy that we find that this power, pagan Rome, would last for a time. That's 360 years. And we outlined the start date of that 360 years, and we outlined the finish date of that 360 years. Revelation chapter 8, verse 2. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. In the seals, we have had the history of the church during what is called the Christian era. In the 7 trumpets, now introduced, we have the principal political and warlike events that occurred during the same time. So what this tells us is that there are parallel histories. You've got the 7 churches, you've got the 7 seals, and you have the 7 trumpets. And they are 3 timelines that are paralleling one another. Rome in 3 parts. The empire after Constantine was divided into 3 parts, and hence the frequent remark, a third part of men, which we'll find as we study the subject. in allusion to the third part of the empire, which was under the scourge. Under the first 4 trumpets, the 2 western divisions fell, and under the 5th and 6th, the eastern empire was crushed, which was the third part. But under the 7th trumpet, great Babylon empire will sink to rise no more at all. That's by James White. Divisions of Rome. Of this well-known historical fact, Eliot, as quoted by Albert Barnes in his Notes on Revelation 12, verse 4, says, "Twice at least before the Roman Empire became divided permanently into the 3 parts, the eastern and western, there was the tripartite division of the empire. The first occurred in AD 311 when it was divided between Constantine, Licinius and Maximin, the other AD 337 on the death of Constantine, Constans and Constantius."
2 parts.
Sorry, 2, oh, what did I say? 3 parts. 2 parts. And it was in AD 330 that Rome, the power of Rome was transferred to Constantinople, and that was the demise of the Roman Empire. And we find that there was a great battle between Antony, Cleopatra and Augustus Caesar, and that battle concluded in, I think it was 30 AD, and that takes us to the 360 period. I think it was 31 BC, sorry, which then takes us to 330 AD, which is that 360 time period. And here we see the division of the Roman Empire into 3 parts, divided between the 3 sons of Constantine. We have this part here in the green, you've got the pink, and then you've got the yellow. That was the 3 divisions of Rome. Oops. Revelation chapter 8:3. "And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. The angel who approached the altar is not the one of the 7 trumpet angels. The altar is the altar of incense, which is the earthly sanctuary, was placed in the first apartment. Here then is another proof that there exists in heaven a sanctuary with its corresponding vessels of service, of which the earth was a figure, and that we are taken into that sanctuary by the visions of John." Mediation in the sanctuary. A work of ministration for all the saints in the sanctuary above is thus brought to view, which again shows that there is a temple in heaven. This angel is Christ, as only he is ministering in the sanctuary. Also, the altar of incense is now in the most holy place. The incense is only offered with our prayers. If we don't ask for what we need and want, we will not receive it. Revelation chapter 8, verse 5. "And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake." By this act is shown that there is no more mediation. We find that when Christ throws down the altar, when he throws down his robes, that is the end of probation. No more prayers are to be offered up mingled with incense. This symbolic act can have its application only at the time when the ministration of Christ in the sanctuary in behalf of mankind has forever ceased in the most holy place, which is the close of human probation. This is when he makes his solemn announcement, "He that is righteous, let him be righteous still, and he that is unjust, let him be unjust still." Revelation 22:11. The 7 trumpets. The 7 trumpets are not the same as the 7 last plagues, as some would have us to believe. Not only are there similarities, but there are also a greater number of differences between the plagues and the trumpets. Here we see some similarities between the trumpets and the plagues. They're both upon the earth, upon the sea, rivers and fountains, the sun smitten, air darkened, the river Euphrates is mentioned, the mystery of God is finished, there's lightnings, voices and thunders and earthquakes and great hail. But there are also differences which show that they cannot be one and the same thing. 4 affect 1/3 of the earth, hail, fire and blood. 1/3 of the sea to blood, creatures die. As you work your way through the list, you can see that there are clear differences between the trumpets and the 7 last plagues. 7 angels and the 7 trumpets. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Revelation 8:6. The subject of the 7 trumpets is here resumed and occupies the remainder of this chapter and all of chapter 9. The 7 angels prepare themselves to sound. Their sounding comes in as a complement to the prophecy of Daniel 2 and 7, commencing with the breaking up of the old Roman Empire into its 10 divisions, of which in the first 4 trumpets we have a description. That's taken from Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith. Trumpets. In Scripture, the trumpet was employed for 4 different reasons: to proclaim the various festivals of Israel, such as the Sabbath, new moons, New Year, holy convocations, and feasts; to summon Israel to prayer and praise; to proclaim the time of each advance of the camp of Israel in their wilderness journeyings toward the promised land; and a call to arms or a warning or alarm of an enemy invasion and overthrow of Jericho. These 7 trumpets all talk about forces that affected the area of the Roman Empire, first pagan Rome and then papal Rome. The context here is war. However, during this time it is also a call for God's people to draw close to God in worship, as we are in the time of the 7th trumpet. We find in the book of Numbers, chapter 10, verses 1 to 10, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeyings of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And if they blow but with 1 trumpet, then the princes which are heads of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves unto thee. When you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east parts shall go forward. When you blow an alarm the 2nd time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, ye shall blow, but ye shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. And if you go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God." In Leviticus chapter 23, 24 and 25, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord." Leviticus chapter 25, "Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the day of atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself in it, nor gather the grapes in it of thy vine undressed. For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy unto you. Ye shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In the year of this Jubilee ye shall return every man unto his possession." And in Zephaniah chapter 1, "A day of wrath and distress. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly, even the voice of the day of the Lord. The mighty man shall cry there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness." A day of the trumpet and alarm against the fenced cities and against the high towers, and I will bring distress upon men, that they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against the Lord, and their blood shall be poured out as dust, and their flesh as the dung. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy. For he shall make even a speedy riddance of all them that dwell in the land. So here we have the trumpet, synonymous with war, distress, and conflict. A trumpet denotes an invasion of enemy forces. This is made very clear by Jeremiah. Blow ye the trumpet in the land, cry, gather together, and say, assemble yourselves, and let us go into the defenced cities. It denotes an invasion is imminent, enemy forces are at hand. And I am pained at my very heart, my heart makes a noise in me. I cannot hold my peace, because thou hast heard, O my soul, the sound of the trumpet, the alarm of war. William Miller had some things to say about trumpets. In prophetical scripture, the sounding of trumpets is always used to denote the downfall of some empire, nation, or place, or some dreadful battle which may decide the fate of empires, nations, or places. At the fall of Jericho, the trumpet was the instrument. In the hands of the priest of the mighty God of Jacob, which cast down her walls, destroyed the city, and a curse pronounced against the man that should ever build up her walls again. Again, the trumpet was the instrument by which Gideon put to flight the armies of the aliens. And the prophet Amos says, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? The last three trumpets will claim our attention in this discourse, the first four having their accomplishment under pagan Rome, and to the last three under papal Rome. These three trumpets and their woes are a description of the judgments that God has sent and will send on this papal beast, the abomination of the whole earth. Therefore we see the propriety of the language of our text, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, meaning the worshippers of this papal beast, the followers of this abomination. The fifth trumpet alludes to the rise of the Turkish Empire under Ottoman and the downfall of the Saracens. Ottoman uniting under his government the four contending nations of Mahometans, which had long contended for the power during the reign of the Saracen Empire, viz. The Syrian Saracens, the Tartars, Arabs, and the Turks. These, all being by profession Mahometans, were ready to follow any daring leader to conquer and drive out from Asia and even make excursions into Europe, all who professed the Christian faith. They, having embraced the errors of that fallen star Muhammad, whose principles were promulgated by conquest and the sword, became one and perhaps the only barrier to the spread of the papal doctrine and power in the Eastern world. Here the Roman Church had long held a powerful sway over the minds and consciences of the Christian or Greek churches in the East, by the aid of the Eastern Emperor at Constantinople. But the Turks or Ottomans, from whom the Lord suffered to rise up in Bithynia or near the headwaters of the Euphrates as a scourge against this papal abomination, now became a check to the Roman power. And from this time we may reasonably date the declension of papal authority. Therefore, on the sounding of the fifth trumpet, Rome papal began to show a weakness which in every succeeding age has been more and more manifested, until her civil power has crumbled to ruin, and her ecclesiastical assumption must sink at the sounding of the seventh trump, to rise no more forever. William Miller actually believed in 1844 that the Roman or the papal power would be completely smashed under the seventh trumpet, because he thought that was going to be the end of the world. But we know that the seventh trumpet started in 1844, but actually concludes until the third coming of Christ. Revelation chapter 8, verse 7. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. Sir Isaac Newton says this: such a fire was cast upon the earth, the Roman world, the territorial platform of prophecy. Sir Isaac Newton, Observations upon the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John. Hail. What does hail mean? Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and a strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, shall be trodden under feet. Here the Assyrian army that desolated apostate Israel is likened to hail. Assyria were from the north. One important principle found in the Old Testament is that the punisher of God's people in the end gets punished too. For this reason, after apostate Israel gets pummeled by the hail of the Assyrian army, the Assyrians too receive hail and fire. And the Lord shall cause his glorious voice to be heard, and shall show the lightning down of his arm, with the indignation of his anger, and with the flame of a devouring fire, with scattering and tempest and hailstones. For through the voice of the Lord shall the Assyrian be beaten down, which smote with a rod. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 30 and 31. The prophet is describing the Assyrian invasion, likens it to a mighty hailstorm. Again, in describing the invasion of Gog and Magog, the prophet Ezekiel says, Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land. Thou and all thy bands and many people with thee. Hailstorms that fell upon Roman territory always came from the north, so this suggests that this invasion will be from the northern regions. The symbolism also suggests the destruction of the countryside, for the third part of trees was burnt up and all green grass. This also indicates that forests, pastures and crops will be destroyed by the invasion. Thirdly, it has hail and fire mingled with blood, denoting carnage of the slaughter both of beasts and people, and trees and grass are also representative of people. The prediction says a third. 1/3 of the trees and all green grass. The third that is mentioned throughout the trumpets applies to a third part of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire after Constantine the Great was divided into the three parts. Hence the frequent remark, a third part of men, is an allusion to the third part of the empire which was under the scourge. This division of the Roman kingdom was made at the death of Constantine among his three sons, Constantius, Constantine II, and Constans. And Constantius possessed the east and fixed his residence at Constantinople, the metropolis of the empire. And Constantine II held Britain, Gaul, and Spain. And Constans held Illyricum and Africa and Italy. This hell is the time when the barbarians began to come from the north and attack the areas of the Roman Empire. Hail in this prophecy represents that they came to destroy from the cold lands of the north. Just like hail destroys the garden, so these warriors destroyed everything in their path. The first trumpet. Alexander Keith has justly remarked on the subject of this prophecy. None could elucidate the text more clearly or expound them more fully than the task has been accomplished by Edward Gibbon. The chapters of the skeptical philosopher that treat directly of the matter need but a text to be prefixed and a few unholy words to be blotted out to form a series of expository lectures on the 8th and 9th chapters of the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ. Little or nothing is left for the professed interpreter to do but to point to the pages of Gibbon. This is found in Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and Revelation. The first sore and heavy judgments which fell on Western Rome in its downward course was the war with the Goths under Alaric, who opened the way for later inroads. The death of Theodosius, the Roman Emperor, occurred in January AD 395, and before the end of the winter the Goths under Alaric were in arms against the empire. Hail and fire mingled with blood were cast upon the earth. The terrible effects of this Gothic invasion are represented as hail from the northern origins of the invaders, fire from the destruction by flame of both city and country, and blood from the terrible slaughter of the citizens of the empire by the bold and intrepid warriors. The first trumpet, the blast of the first trumpet, has its location about the close of the 4th century and onward, and refers to these desolating invasions of the Roman Empire under the Goths, and more specifically it was the Visigoths that made this invasion. And here we see the Gothic invasion under Alaric, how they spread, and they eventually ended up down here where you can see it in the Visigoths near Portugal and Spain. After making this summary, Keith completes the picture by saying, "The concluding sentence of this 33rd chapter of Gibbon's history is of itself a clear and comprehensive commentary, for in winding up his own description of this brief but most eventful period, he concentrates, as in a parallel reading, the sum of the history and the substance of the prediction. But the words which precede it are not without their meaning. The public devotion of the age was impatient to exalt the saints and martyrs of the Catholic Church on the altars of Diana and Hercules. The union of the Roman Empire was dissolved, its genius was humbled in the dust, and armies of unknown barbarians issued from the frozen regions of the north had established their victorious reign over the fairest provinces of Europe and Africa." And the last word, Africa, is the signal for the sounding of the second trumpet. The scene changes from the shores of the Baltic to the southern coast of the Mediterranean, or from the frozen regions of the north to the borders of burning Africa. And instead of a storm of hell being cast upon the earth, a burning mountain was cast into the sea. From AD 330, with the removal of government to Constantinople, started the demise of Rome, and the first trumpet covered the period from 395 AD to 410 AD. Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 to 9. "And the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which are in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed." This symbolism suggests a power connected with the sea, an invasion by a sea power likened to a burning mountain. What does a mountain represent in prophecy? Scripture is clear that a mountain represents a kingdom. "I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroys all the earth. I will make thee a burnt mountain." Jeremiah 51:25. "Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth. And I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make thee a burnt mountain. Set ye up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her. Call together against her the kingdoms of Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. Appoint a captain against her. Cause the horses to come up as the rough caterpillars. Prepare against the nations with the kings of the Medes, the captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. And the land shall tremble and sorrow, for every purpose of the Lord shall be performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a desolation without an inhabitant." Here we see that the destruction of Babylon is likened to a destroying mountain. And notice that there were four powers that came against Babylon: kingdoms of Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz, and Persia. So it took four powers to bring down Babylon, and it took four trumpets to bring down Western Rome. This is a judgment against Babylon. Through the agency of the invading confederated armies of at least four kingdoms, Babylon would become a burnt mountain. Confederacy of four means worldwide. It took a union of four to bring down Babylon. It took four trumpets to bring down Western Rome. It took four angels to bring down Eastern Rome. It took four angels or powers to bring down Muslim world in 1840. And the Confederacy of the United Nations to hold back radical Islam has taken the whole world, which is representative of four. The sounding of the second trumpet evidently relates to the invasion and conquest of Africa, and afterward of Italy by Genseric, king of the Vandals. His conquests were for the most part naval, and his triumphs were, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. The next great invasion after Alaric was that of Genseric, at the head of the Vandals. His career reached its height between the years AD 428 to 468. This great Vandal chief had his headquarters in Africa, but as Gibbon states, the discovery and conquest of the black nations in Africa that might dwell beneath the torrid zone could not tempt the rational ambition of Genseric, but he cast his eyes towards the sea. He resolved to create a naval power, and his bold resolution was executed with steady and active perseverance. From the port of Carthage, he repeatedly made piratical sallies, preyed on the Roman commerce, and waged war with that empire. The Vandals were unique among the German nations by the fact that they maintained a fleet. The loss of Africa was perhaps one of the greatest calamities which could have overtaken the Western Empire. And the reason being that Africa was the granary of Rome, so the loss of Africa meant the loss of a main source of Rome's food supply. Genseric even sailed up to the Tiber, and he sacked the city of Rome. Amongst the treasures that he took from that city were the golden candlesticks and the golden table and other items that Titus had captured from the temple of Jerusalem. When the Vandal fleet was returning to Carthage, there arose a great storm, and one ship only submerged beneath the ocean. It was the ship carrying the golden candlestick and the sacred vessels which originally had come from the temple of God in Jerusalem. And that was found in Edward Gibbon. That's interesting, isn't it? The one ship that has stolen these goods is the one ship that sank. And here we see the migration of the Vandals and how they settled in Africa, and from Africa they launched their naval attacks. Before he died, in the fullness of the year and of glory, he beheld the final extinction of the empire of the West. The second trumpet period was between 428 AD to 468 AD. In 533, the Byzantine general Belisarius landed in Africa. The Vandals were several times defeated, and Carthage was entered, and the same year they were routed in the decisive battle of Tricurnium. In the next year, Africa, Sardinia and Corsica were restored to the Roman Empire. As a nation, the Vandals soon ceased to exist. And notice that the Vandals was one of the 3 horns to be plucked up. There are few instances in history of a nation disappearing so rapidly and so completely as the Vandals of Africa. It is reckoned that during the reign of Justinian, the emperor of Eastern Rome, Africa lost 5 million of its inhabitants. Thus, Arianism was extinguished in that region, not by any enforcement of conformity, but by the extermination of the race which had introduced and professed it. This was history of the Christian ode. And this was the removal of the second horn in 533 AD. Revelation chapter 8, 10 to 11. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. The third trumpet, in the interpretation and application of this passage, we are brought to the third important event